Okay. Welcome to YALSA's monthly member webinar. My name is Cheyenne Sons, and I'm a member of YALSA's Education Advisory Committee, and I will be your host for today. Please feel free to share your name and library in the chat. Before we get started, I do want to remind you that this session is being recorded, and if you have any questions for our presenters, please put them in the Q&A area, and they'll address the questions within the last 15 minutes of the presentation. Lastly, at the end of the presentation, there will be a survey link posted for you to provide feedback on this webinar. Today's topic is the 2022 YA Symposium Information and Highlights. And our presenters for this are the YALSA's Educational Advisory Committee and special guest. And so committee members, you can go ahead and introduce yourselves.
Hi, I'm Lisa Bearfield. I work at the Wheaton Public Library in Illinois.
Hi, I'm Carolyn Aversano, the Teen Services Librarian for the Edison Public Library in New Jersey.
Hi, I'm Carla Jameson, and I am the Program Officer with YALSA. And I would like to introduce or let our special guest introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Chelsea Melvin. I am at the Main Library Teen Center in Nashville, Tennessee. Thank you guys so much for inviting me to join you today. I am not on the committee, but I was a first-time YALSA attendee this year. Thank you, especially to Yvette for the invitation to join.
Not a problem. My name is Yvette Garcia. I am the chair for the Educational Advisory Committee. We have put together a small presentation of just our favorite sessions that we were able to attend. Obviously, we can attend every session, so we couldn't give every single detail away. We're also going to provide some background information and just some common facts for those that have ever been curious about Symposium. The first thing I wanted to let you know is there are some annual events that take place every single year. Symposium opens with an opening and closing author panel. Every year we try to provide informal networking opportunities such as dining arounds where people get to sign up to have dinner with strangers. Everybody loves the most our book blitz and galley grab. This is an opportunity for participants to go home with free books, and many of which are autographed by authors that are present. But that's not the only thing that people love. People also love many of our pre-conferences where we get the opportunity to take a deeper dive into some of the hot trends in librarianship.
So Friday pre-conference sessions are like mini boot camps. A lot of valuable information concentrated in a half day or full day, depending on the topic. My favorite was the Manga in Libraries half-day session, and it really delivered. Jillian Roods is a New York City school librarian and Japanese culture expert for the school district as well. She's incredibly enthusiastic and so very knowledgeable and wants to share that with everyone. This session covered the basics of manga and dove into useful topics like collection development, using manga in programming, and responding to formal and informal challenges of why do you even have manga on your shelves? Jillian emphasized the importance of having a manga collection for teens in school and public libraries. Essentially, manga checks the box for so many forms of literacies: verbal literacy, vocabulary, visual cues, cultural literacy, contextual cues, and their relationship to social emotional learning, which everybody, that's totally the hot topic now. Her website, also known as mangainlibraries.com, has book lists and videos. Her book that's coming out in April, Manga in Libraries from ALA, is really filled with a lot of things that she covered at the pre-conference. And the Education Advisory Committee is really excited to have Jillian as our March member webinar focus. If you don't elect to attend a pre-conference session, Symposium opens Friday night with an author panel. This year's panel included Lee Bardugo, who is always entertaining if you've ever heard her speak, Danny Pendergast, who was the illustrator of Lee's graphic novel, and Alex Astor, whose YA debut fantasy, Lightlark, made my TBR pile, and I am not a fantasy person at all. Things get really serious on Saturday as the first session begins at 8 a.m.
It's totally worth waking up early. Attending that 8 a.m. session was a little bit of a struggle, but I was so happy to get to hear about the Prince George's County Memorial Library System's summer camp. The presentation was called Not Your Typical Summer Camp, Engaging Teens in Responsible and Responsive Activism. It was such a cool idea, a grant-funded program for 5 week-long summer camps, up to 20 teens at 5 different library branches, where teens could both learn about the history of activism and learn project management skills to think about how they wanted to participate in activism. It's a huge idea, but they broke it down really well. We're really open about sharing what went well and what they might want to change going forward. And we're really great about sharing resources if that was something that we might be interested in looking in at our libraries doing something similar.
Thanks, Chelsea. I also attended Not Your Typical Summer Camp, and it was really difficult to get up that early, but totally worth it, as you said. My favorite session on Saturday, and this is going to sound odd, was how to talk to youth about human trafficking. The Department of Homeland Security's Blue Campaign Specialist, Diego, I will totally mispronounce his last name, made a potentially depressing topic incredibly interesting and moving. He put trafficking into a new perspective. He drew a distinction between trafficking and human smuggling, which are two completely different things, and people generally conflate those two topics. He outlined the methods used that define trafficking, essentially force, fraud, and coercion. And he emphasized that there is no single profile of a trafficking victim. It literally could be anyone. There's also no single profile of someone who does traffic. So again, that could be anyone as well. He presented so much valuable information that I'm still kind of sifting through everything and seeing what I can do in my library.
Yes.
And next,
yeah. Not everything was so serious. My favorite program on Saturday was Passive Interactive Programming by Sarah from the Indian Prairie Public Library here in the Chicagoland area in Darien, Illinois. This is one of those sessions that was chock full of ideas of what to do, but also had that this is how we implemented it here. This is how you can implement it at your library. The presenter was really, really good about walking us through the different ideas she had for interactive or passive programming. My favorite was a teen post. I think we've all had the idea of putting up a question and then just putting post-it notes. She shared some of those examples. She shared, some of the staff discussions around some of those posts. And she also shared how teens would interact with each other via post-it notes. And we got to see those interactions. It was really, really just an excellent walkthrough and like practical hands-on knowledge from various perspectives of program implementation.
No, it's always really great when programs have some great concrete examples and the breakdown of how they've set everything up. One of the presentations I attended on Sunday did an excellent job of that. And the program was Work Smarter Bootcamp, Wellness and Executive Function in the School Library, and it was presented by Grace Hammond. She noticed in 2020, many of her students were struggling, as many people were, and asked her student advisory members what they needed. What they came up with was organizational help, skills and supplies, as well as help with executive skills and stress relief. Grace used these responses to amend the way the library approached its students and integrated wellness and stress relief and organizational help into the curriculum. She implemented larger projects like virtual and in-person lessons and coaching, appointments and talking one-on-one with their students, and along with more passive options like having coloring sheets available in the library. In her presentation, Grace did an excellent job of not only breaking down how she implemented this integration into the curriculum, but also including research on why wellness and social emotional well-being were important, and feedback from her school and the data that she was getting from the program.
Another great Sunday session that I got the chance to attend, another one that was really talking about how to meet teens where they are, was given by Lacey Latour-Goodine at Martin County Library System in Florida. It was called Let's Rediscover Volunteering, Connecting Youth with the Community. Something that we've been thinking a lot about at my library is how to work with our teen volunteers in a way that really works for them. And Lacey had some awesome ideas. She implemented something called the Teen Community of Service, where teens could register online to pick up a kit with a different volunteer focus each month, and they could track their hours that they spent both researching the organization that the volunteer events were benefiting and actually completing those volunteer events using Beanstack, which is something that they were already familiar with from summer reading. This was super successful in her library system, saw a lot more teen volunteer participants and a lot more teen volunteer numbers. And I think is something that is really interesting to think about how it could be implemented in different places. Again, Lacey was very open about, sharing her contact information and inviting people to get in touch with other questions. And I'm excited to talk more with her about how we might be able to use some of those ideas.
Another session I attended on Sunday was probably one of the most informative ones I attended at Symposium. It was Under Scrutiny, Helping Staff Feel Safe in the Midst of Book Challenges. It was presented by Darcy Accord. She's the Youth Services Librarian at Campbell County Public Library in Gillette, Wyoming. In the past year and a half, her library has faced a barrage of public outcry and book challenges from sections of her community, and they've had to deal with things like protests, upset patrons, and even social media stalking. Darcy's presentation focused on ways to support library staff and prioritizing their safety, including providing training to make sure all staff are knowledgeable of what is happening in the library and feel empowered to address patrons. And they also talked about ways libraries can be proactive in protecting themselves, including reviewing your policies and procedures, knowing your reconsideration process, even kind of looking up what the local laws are in your state or county. The most impactful part of her presentation was discussing the behavior of the groups as harassment, and kind of separate as just like patrons doing it in good faith complaint, but ones that are actually harassing and being abusive to the library and the staff. And these behaviors can include things like character assassination and privacy violations, and ways to help your staff be aware of these patterns, as well as knowledge to protect yourselves as much as possible, including privatizing social media accounts or being aware, the conversations maybe being recorded by patrons. And it was definitely a heavier session, but increasingly important, I think, in our current climate, and resulted in some really great conversation between library staff about their experiences, which on the later end goes into one of my favorite parts of Symposium, which is the networking and getting ideas from other YA library staff from around the country, especially with sometimes you can get kind of siloed in your library.
Yes, as the first time attendee, that was one of the things I found most exciting about being at Symposium was just how willing folks were to have conversations about all kinds of topics. I think opening with the author panel was so fun because there were so many funny and really poignant moments during that panel. It gave you a lot of things to chat about while you were waiting in line to get your book signed, or waiting in line to grab a drink after the presentation. I also, though, felt like there were so many people who were willing to chat, but it was also totally okay if you wanted to sit and take a minute and just take everything in. It was a really nice opportunity for either one of those ways of interacting with everyone at the conference. I also appreciated that we got really clear directions from YALSA about where to be and when to be. So you knew what room you needed to go to, but there was also always someone there with the name tag on who was able to help if you got confused or had questions about anything. And another thing that was so helpful for me in planning out which presentations to go to and just thinking about the YALSA experience in general is that we were told in advance that the slides would be posted. So we were able to know while we were at the presentations that we didn't have to scribble down everything on the slides. We would be able to go back and reference all the great things that the presenters were saying.
Another great thing about Symposium is there are coordinated special events. There's an author's luncheon, but also this year, my favorite special event was a tour of the Enoch Pratt Free Library. They were wonderful hosts. They had a wonderful reception for us with various different activities scattered throughout the building. And the tour was my favorite. We got to see areas of the children's library that were truly magical. They had like this real life koi pond and this room that was called the night room. And you can see in the slide where many of us were just kind of relaxing in this atmosphere and taking pictures of this dome that had it was like an indoor starry night atmosphere. It was absolutely gorgeous. A few of us did go on just a walk in between sessions or during lunch along the harbor, and we got to see some beautiful scenery as well. All of the sessions, the networking, the special events are coordinated by the Symposium Task Force, which is a group of member volunteers. Carla, can you please tell us more about your crew?
Sure. So I am, like I said earlier, the program officer for YALSA, and one of my major tasks is putting on the symposium every year, but I could not do this without the help of the Symposium Task Force. They are a group of volunteers that typically starts at the beginning of the year and goes, their duties run all the way through the symposium. They set the scene for the symposium as well as the theme for the author panels. So that all is coordinated. We try to have some rhyme and reason to why we set the theme for it, and as well as those panels. The task force will review the proposals that come in. So the sessions that you were just learning about were all submitted through a portal as a proposal. And then the task force took all those. They had a rubric which they used to go over those sessions and really take a good look at what they were, what was going to be presented. I think that's always a really hard thing, to take what somebody puts down and know how it's going to turn out when it becomes a session. So, I think I felt this year, based on the evaluations, that we did a pretty good job of delivering what the speakers did a great job of delivering what they said they were going to present. So I thought that was really good. The task force will also depending on the size of the task force each year, the more people we have on it, the more we can divide and conquer. But this year we had a very small one. We had 3 members, and 2 of those members, task force members, served as the author panel moderators. But the whole task force worked together. They, reviewed the books that the authors were speaking on. We had a couple of last-minute author cancellations, which was a real bummer. But I just think that's the times that we are living in right now. With just people being, things coming up and a little, weary to travel, are, cautious to make those travel plans. So unfortunately, there's not a whole lot we can do about that. And then lastly, they work on the book blitz and galley grab. So that is, like Yvette said, it's something everybody looks forward to because you get to take home a lot of books, but it's also, as far as the task force, they help set everything up when we're on site. So they are a huge help, and we really couldn't do that without them. As far as my position, I help or start to look for this site or the hotel that we're going to have our symposium. We base it on, we try each year to go to a different part of the country. So we were just East Coast. 2024, we're looking at Midwest, and then, or 23 is Midwest, and then 24 would probably be West Coast. And then we do look at what you call like tier 2 cities. So we're not going to go to New York City because that's just out of our price range. Chicago, for the most part, hotels are out of our price range. So that's how we pick the cities that, we're looking for. We try to be very conscious of, how you guys, we know everybody's on a limited budget, so we want to get the best hotel price that we can, but also being in, we want it to be, a safe environment for everybody. And, obviously it's kind of like a little mini vacation for some people when they go away. So it's, you want to be in a nice hotel. I'm also in charge of all the communications for the symposium, sponsorships, which are a big part. So if you ever, come across somebody who you think would be a great sponsor for our symposium, please just pass that along. I also do logistics with the hotel, and then the evaluations. And then on site, we will have more YALSA staff there to help us out. Real quick, I will go over some of the symposium quick facts. We typically have between 350 to 450 attendees. There'll be a total of more like 500 people at the symposium when you get all the authors and the speakers. It's, for both public and school YA librarians. And it's usually held annually at the beginning of November. The YA authors, so those, participate in that opening author panel as well as the closing one. And then we also have the Morris author panel, which is for debut YA authors. Typically, we'll have 10 to 12 authors who will sign books at the Book Blitz. And then the galley grab, as we mentioned before, we'll have the publishers will sign galleys for attendees to gather. One of the highlights, as Yvette mentioned, is the Margaret A. Edwards Award Luncheon. And that year, so this used to be at ALA Annual and is now moved to Symposium because it is, really significant award for a YA author for YALSA. So we decided it should be at the Symposium. So there's an opportunity for everybody to attend the lunch and get, typically get all the books signed that the author, sends along ahead of time. So that is pretty much, the kind of behind the scenes look at the symposium. If you all have questions, please put them in the chat if I didn't cover something you're looking for.
So from the attendee side, symposium registration opens up around June 1st, and YALSA members receive the best registration rate. Speakers also receive a reduced registration rate. So if you're doing anything super exciting at your library or have anything that you would like to share, we would love to hear it. Just reach out to YALSA and the Symposium Task Force. And then YALSA also has 2 travel stipends awards to help with the travel costs as well. If you have any additional questions, Carla is the person to contact. She knows all about this, and her information is there as well. And so if you're interested in helping out, please join the Symposium Task Force. They're always looking for volunteers. YALSA in general is always looking for volunteers. In the chat, we're going to put this link. So if you want to sign up, if you might be interested, please feel free to sign up. And we hope to see you all next year, regardless of whether you're a volunteer or an attendee or a speaker. Where it's at is still to be determined, but we hope that you get involved. And with that, I'm going, we have time for any questions.
Okay, it looks like we have a question in the Q&A. It says, I would love to attend in person, but I work for a system that only allows overnight conferences for the director. Are the symposium sessions ever presented after the fact as online webinars? Anybody want to speak to that?
Yeah, I can go ahead and speak to that. I know that this year there are 2 sessions that were specifically at Symposium. Everybody was talking about how great they were. So the Educational Advisory Committee has reached out so that way they can do complimentary webinars. Does this take place each and every single year? Probably not on a consistent basis, simply because the Education Advisory Committee is a new committee. We've been in existence for about 2 years. And so our job is to kind of generate ideas for webinars. And that's where we kind of like get some of our ideas and speakers. I believe 2 or 3 years ago, Symposium was virtual. And I believe last year it was hybrid as well. And so now that we're in the post-pandemic world, we are like reflecting upon what Symposium looks like. Carla, can you give any updates on that, if you have any?
Well, just the fact that, I think going ahead, we're, going to continue with the in-person symposium. There would be, hopefully as the years go on, maybe we could, I would like to try to do more of the sessions as webinars post symposium, because I do understand that not everybody can come. So, we really, our goal is, education. And so we're really trying to, like this year, make more of the sessions available. So, and then I did see another question in the chat about how many volunteers do we have this year? Like our task force was 3 volunteers. We do have, any board members who attend the symposium and other, some like Education and Advisory Committee was 3 out of the 4 committee people were at the symposium, so they helped out when they could. So it's, it's kind of where we can, we get help where we can, but the more that would join the task force, I think the better.
And speaker Grace Hammond is also here in the webinar, and she shows her support for the organizers as well and the behind the scenes, and gives a little shout out. So thank you for that. I think that is much appreciated. to everyone who worked behind the scenes. Do we have any other questions for our panelists? Or any closing remarks? And unfortunately, we were only able to briefly cover the symposium, but there were a lot of great sessions. So hopefully everyone can go next year, and we're always looking for feedback on our events. So please click on the link in the chat to complete the survey. And there'll be a follow-up email as well with the survey link and access to this recording. And please join us on January 12th at 1 p.m. Central for our member webinar, Information Safety, Identity Protection, and Anti-Doxing Measures for Librarians. Thank you all for joining us.
Oh, just last night, I was going to say there's information on the YALSA website for that webinar, and you can also go to the ALA CE and look up that webinar if you're interested in registering. But thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.